Hey everybody, today we're going to do 9-3 reteaching. The objective for this lesson is to explain how to estimate fractional amounts of objects. So how to kind of estimate fractions and explain how you got your answer. When we are doing this, when we are trying to achieve this goal, we are going to be using benchmark fractions. Benchmark fractions, just a reminder, are fractions that can be easily recognized. So visually you can tell what they're close to, and they can be used to estimate with fractions. Okay, so here we have a shape down below. It wants you to estimate how much of the shape is shaded. And we are then going to explain how we did that. So looking at this shape, I know that half of this shape would be right about here. So I can see pretty clearly that my shaded section is going to be greater than 1/2. Okay, so then if I look at the size of my white chunk or my unshaded chunk right here, I might want to split the gray part into kind of equal amounts. And I know that's hard to do when you're just eyeballing it, but we're going to do our best. So if I look at this part right here, I notice it's about the same as this other part. And remember, this first line, this blue line right here, was where my halfway mark was on this whole shape. So we have two kind of equal pieces on 1/2. So I might want to assume that there's going to be the same thing on the other half. So here I have 4 equal pieces that I've divided it into. And these are pretty even. They're not perfect, but they're pretty close. And remember, we're just estimating. So if we have 4 equal pieces, that tells us our denominator is going to be 4. Now we need to take a look at how many are shaded in. Well, there's 1, 2, 3 gray ones. So that would be 3/4 of this shape about is shaded in, okay? And we're going to take a look at a quality explanation on the next slide for the problem we just did. You see our shape again without any of my horrible coloring on it, and I typed out a response down at the bottom that I think is a pretty high quality response. And if I saw this on one of my kids' responses, I would think, man, this kid's got it. They understand what's going on. So here's the response. I think the shaded part is about 3/4. I decided on this estimate because I can tell that the gray is covering more than 1/2. Remember, that's what we talked about very first. And then I split the gray section into equal parts that are about the same size as that white section. So again, this is what we did on the last page. We split it up so all of the sections were about the same size as the unshaded. There were 4 equal parts and 3 of those are shaded. So that's how we got the estimate of 3/4. Let's take a look at another example just to get some extra practice in. Alright, so we're going to do one more example. Well, another example. And for some reason my slide got erased, but so we're going to have to deal with my fantastic drawings. But we're going to do the exact same thing here that we did on the previous slide, where we are figuring out how much is shaded and explaining how we figured that out. So I'm going to start very similar to how I did last time by dividing this in half, because 1/2 is one of those benchmark fractions that's very easy to see, very easy to make, very easy to recognize. So I'm going to take my red pen here and I'm going to just divide it in half lengthwise. Okay, so we have 2 halves here, and obviously our shaded gray area is much smaller than the 1/2. So we need to figure out about how many equal parts can be made from that 1/2. So we want to take a look at this particular square here, and we want to try and make this rectangle have equal parts to this square. So we could try dividing it into 4s. Let's try that. See if we have 4 equal parts on the left side. So I would have to probably do, so there's, if I divide it into 4 pieces. Well, you can tell that our shaded square is much bigger than any of the other 3 pieces that I have over there. So I can probably assume that 4th maybe is a little too much. So let's try bumping it down to 1/3, because I know if I divide this side in half, this half in half, so I have 4ths, that's still smaller. So we need to divide it down a little bit more. So let's try dividing it into 1/3, and we'll see if that's our magic number. So if we divide this into 1/3, it'd probably be, let's see, my square here, and then probably right about there. And notice that these pieces, these 3 pieces over on the left, are much more evenly split and much more equal to this shaded spot than both my halves and my fourths. So if we were to carry these lines across, we could see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 total pieces. So our denominator is going to be 6, that's our whole, and we just have one square shaded in. So our estimate is going to be about 1/6. Okay, so when I do my explanation, I'm going to talk about how I first started by dividing this in half. I looked at that and to see, is my estimate, is it going to be greater than half? Is it going to be less than half? Well, we know that it's much less than half because it only goes to here. And it would have to go all the way here if it was a half. So then we divided, and remember this is all in your explanation, then we divided that half into equal parts that were about the same size as our shaded part to figure out how many total pieces we had in our whole rectangle. And we found that we had 6, only one of them was shaded in, therefore our estimate was 1. So here we have a question that's a little bit different than the ones we've been answering, but still has to do with estimating and using benchmark fractions. All right, so our directions are to draw 2 circles that are different sizes. Color half of each circle. Are the shaded parts the same size? Are they the same value? So let's take a look. Let's first start by drawing our circles. There's one, and here's another. Okay, notice how they're both circles. They are also both different sizes. So our directions say to color each one, or color half of each one. Okay, so I'm going to switch to blue and do some KU coloring. Okay, so half of that is shaded in, and half of that is shaded in. We'll pretend like it's all the way shaded and not going over the lines. All right, so now we have our 2 halves shaded in. Our first part of our question says, are they the same size? Well, let's take a look at that. Look at this half of the circle compared to this half of the circle. Notice that these are much different sized half circles. These half circles are the one on the left is much larger than the one on the right. So no, they are not the same size because the circles are different sizes. The one on the left is much larger, so the half is going to be much larger. The next question asks, is it the same value? Well, in this case, we're looking at half of this circle and half of this circle. So technically speaking, these are representing the same value. They're both representing 1/2 of a whole. So both of these have the same value. Both of them are showing 1/2, but they are just different sizes because of the size of the circle. But the value, the 1/2, is the same. So they're not the same size, but they are the same value. And that's important to know that if you have half of something, it may be a different size, but it's going to be the same part of the whole. Notice that our whole circle, our big red circle, this is the same part of the whole as this half circle is to our smaller circle. They are both showing 1/2 of the whole, the same part of the whole.